Jason Cunningham, and welcome back to Save My Business, the podcast dedicated to helping small and medium-sized business owners navigate through the proverbial shitstorm. Today's guest is one with a bit of a twist. His name's Steve Griffiths. Welcome, Steve-O.
Thanks, Jason. Great
How are
to
you,
be
pal?
Very well.
Now, a lot of people are probably asking, why the hell have I got this country's greatest meditation teacher on the Save My Business podcast? And I thought, with a lot of the work that you've done with me, particularly around November and December and helping me calm the hell down, and I mentioned this a couple of times before on this podcast, sometimes the universe speaks to us blokes and we need to hear her voice a few times before we take heed of her advice. And I think the fifth person that said to me, Jason, you'd really benefit from meditation was Jaden Comerford, and he introduced us to each other. And I just wanted to ask you a few questions about the art of meditation and how that helps us with our mindfulness, particularly over the last 12 months, what we've dealt with. And there's some talk also that now that we've come out of lockdown and we're going back to, as Dan Andrews would say, COVID normal or whatever, that our senses are heightened and people are somewhat challenged with it. And I just want to have some conversations with you around how you see mindfulness and how that's benefited a lot of your clients, and also, more importantly, how it's benefited you and your family.
No, thanks, Jason. Look, I think COVID as a whole, showed a lot of people how they needed to change their life a little bit. It did slow them down enough to think, gee whiz, do I really want to kind of go back into the hurly-burly of life without maintaining a different state of mind? Yeah. So in all of our teachings, in leaders and business owners, it's always been, what state are you in? Yeah. And, therefore, there's a little bit of self-awareness with that. But meditation really has been, for us over the last 30 years, has been the mainstay of teaching within leadership.
Yeah. Steve, I just as you were speaking then, your voice is so calming and your energy is amazing. And some would argue, close friends of mine might say that I'm a little bit highly strung and have a little bit of energy about the place. And I remember our first engagement, or first conversation was when I rang you. Jaden had introduced us and I rang you and I reached out to you and I said, you said, what do you do for work? Have you got a bit on? I said, look, I'm pretty important. I'm pretty busy. I got a few appointments, and we sort of tried to check the availability. I remember this conversation quite vividly, right? And you said, look, what I need 4 days in a row, an hour day one, and then 2 hour, 2 hour, and 2 hour blocks. And he said, what do you like? And I said, look, I've got a fair bit on coming up, and in the lead up to Christmas. And I think I was speaking to you around November or something like that.
Yep, November.
And I said, how about January the 13th? And you said, I can do next week or February 25. And I said, how's the arrogance on this bloke? And I don't know, I felt like, I'd been ignoring the universe for so long that we booked it in. And you can make things work. And I think I saw you the following Monday. And you said, if you're happy with that, let me call you back later on this afternoon and take you through some of the nuances of our meeting and how that goes. And I found that conversation quite intriguing, where you shared with me the tradition of the art of meditation. Do you mind sharing with our listeners some of that sort of stuff? Yeah,
look, definitely. I mean, I was trained to become a teacher of meditation back in 1979. Meditation nowadays is very universally sort of mindfulness, words like that. But meditation was first brought to the West really in 1959 by Maharishi Mahesh, who was very famous for the Beatles and, teaching really the 60s and 70s was sort of that heyday where millions of people learned to meditate.
Was he handing out LSD and?
Well, I think he was helping people make the transition from LSD.
Oh, right, okay.
But it was a fascinating era because millions of people learned to meditate in the 70s in America. Yep. It was huge. And I learned in 1976 and became a teacher in 1979, and that became my profession since 1980. But Maharishi himself, interestingly enough, was a science graduate from Allahabad University, and he was the first person to put meditation under the scrutiny of modern science and saying, look, this is not a belief system, this is not something that requires you to change lifestyle or do anything different. Just find a chair, learn correctly how to do it, and your mind will go from being very active to experiencing, subtler and subtler levels. So when we talk about thoughts, as we've said to you many times, every human being has about 80,000 thoughts a day. And
I'm north of about 250,000, I would have thought. Well, I've got a few different voices in my head having different conversations, Steve, as you know.
As we all do to some extent. But so when you learn to meditate, you take the mind from that surface value where, like in the ocean, it's very active, but at the bottom of the ocean, it's very still. But we're always on the surface. We can't get to that place. And so what meditation's doing is that it's taking the mind from being very active to less active and less active. And the mind controls the body. And that's the interesting thing, because when the mind settles down, the body goes into an incredibly deep level of rest. And you can measure that. And that's what Maharishi was really encouraging science to discover, that meditation was changing the brain and the physiology to put you in a different state. It wasn't like, trying to say, be positive and you'll, operate better. It's saying that positivity is a byproduct of how your nervous system's functioning.
Yeah, right. So positivity is a byproduct of, if your mind is in the right state, then you will become positive.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, right.
So, like stress today is a common usage word, but stress was coined by Hans Selye back in the 70s. Oh, actually back in the 40s, not the 70s.
I think a lot of your life happened in the 70s, I'm getting the impression there, Steve.
Yes, I'm very old, Jason. But what that meant was that he coined stress, and he stole it from the engineers, as biologically it was an overload in the system. So stress really predominantly comes from thought. So when you think a thought is a chemical and an electrical activity. So if you have a negative thought or a worrying thought or an anxious thought, it produces a completely different set of chemical responses in the nervous system. So you increase chemicals like adrenaline and cortisol under stress, or the fight or flight response. That causes heart pressure, that causes a myriad of different problems in the nervous system.
I know previously, I have heightened anxiety at times until I learnt the art of meditation. And with my cortisol levels bouncing all over the place, I'd find that at certain periods of the day, I could fall asleep. Like at about 11 o'clock in the morning and at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I could fall asleep in like 10 seconds because of, the chemical reaction going off in my body.
Yeah.
So Steve, let's say what you're telling us is true, and I do believe it, but there may be some skeptics listening to us. There may be.
Yep.
Then how does meditation help us reduce that heightened state or that heightened activity going on in our brain and the energies going on? How does it help us reduce that to bring us into a calmer state? Well,
there's two ways to answer that question. One is that a lot of people will say, like when we teach in sport, for example, and the joke would be, and we were talking about Carlton, and back in '89 when I first started at Carlton with Alec, he'd say, mate, are they all going to be just, asleep? What good's that? Yeah. But it's not about that. It's about, in business, you want high energy, right? You want your foot to the accelerator, but you need to learn how to use the brake.
Yeah.
So it's oscillation, it's rhythm. So you need to know how to go and how to stop. And meditation's the key, because in just 20 minutes, and they measure it, you can get a level of rest twice as deep as the deepest point of sleep.
I remember that, that first week when I came out to see you out there in Heidelberg, and I almost felt like I was on the outside looking in, the experience. And the first day that I came into your office, I was bouncing off the walls, and there's a ritual that we follow, which I really enjoyed that part of it. I know that you left that conversation to the second conversation we had, but I really found that intriguing, the ritual.
Yeah.
And I hope you don't mind me sharing it. If you do, just tell me right now, otherwise it's going to air.
Well, I'll explain why that is, first, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So when you learn...
What's this, your podcast, is it? No.
Well, when you learn, just so that listeners don't get the wrong idea, because meditation is not a religion or a philosophy or anything, but when you learn, of course, we as teachers were trained to teach it in the traditional way, which goes back thousands of years. So it's not like picking up an app, or it's not like, you know, taking something off technology. It's traditional. So when we were trained to teach it, you taught it one-on-one. And that's always been the case. And in that session, you learn the sound, or what's called mantra, which allows you to settle the mind down, and everyone learns their own sound or mantra. But we were trained to honour the teachers, because I couldn't teach you unless my teacher taught me. Which
that's one of the things that I love most about it, is that whole honouring system, and honour the person that's taught me previously. I spoke in our last podcast with Xavier Campbell, who's the CEO of the Essendon Footy Club, and we spoke about a book called Legacy. And Legacy is written, it's a magic, as you know, it's written about the New Zealand All Blacks, and one of the big things about being an All Black is the notion of humility, and to honour the jersey and leave it in a better place than when it was once given to you. And when you shared with me that, you know, this is not my teaching, Jason, this has been passed on to me
thousands of years.
I thought, you know, that's amazing. Tell me, how did you come up with the mantra? Because you said each mantra is individual to the person.
Well, if you remember, you filled out a form. And on that form, there's a little bit of information. And based on that, we're able to choose the correct sound. And that's really important, because it's not just the technique, it's the sound and being taught how to use that sound correctly. And I don't know if you remember, but the very first time people learn, they transcend.
I do remember.
And it's just amazing. You know, people go, you know, I've never been to that place. Awake. So consciously you rest the mind. You're awake. You can hear everything going on around you, but amazingly, you're in a state where the body is deeper than sleep, but you're awake.
I've never been more... Every time I walk out of the office, I've never been in a more peaceful state. Even just being in your company, Griffith. I mean, I just feel so relaxed. The cameraman's fallen asleep, which is outstanding from him. And it's
the producer's definitely asleep.
So part of the tradition was that I had to bring 5 flowers and 2 pieces of fruit. Right? And... as is our way and the way we've connected, when you brought my fruit out, you brought out 2 different pieces of fruit. I got, oh my God, I didn't pass the test. My fruit was too old. It was too shit. And I found that quite funny, that someone had eaten my fruit at your office. It's part of what you do.
No.
Someone eat it or no?
No.
You just didn't like it?
No. I think we won't go too far into that, but I think it was probably just, you know, it's all sweet fruit, so no limes or lemons.
Okay.
So you might have brought a lemon.
Well, there's every chance of that. So you then...
Or I picked up the wrong basket, one or the other.
Steve, I'd be honest with you.
We were rushed that day, we had a lot on.
We did, and I'd rather deflect the problem to you than myself, let's be honest. So you chose the mantra for me. We practiced, we did it together, we spoke it out loud, and then you taught me to say it and use my inside voice, which then took me back to being a kid when my parents told me to use my inside voice because I was speaking too fucking much, you know what I mean? So we did that first day, and then I would walk in, coming to your office and thinking, God, we're going to spend 2 hours together. How the hell are we going to get through 2 hours? You know, because got a few ants in my pants and have the attention span of a 3-year-old, as you're aware. But the 2 hours seemed to fly by, and I would walk out of there with so much clarity and be so much more relaxed. Talk to me a bit more and share with our listeners a bit more about the chemical reaction. And you know how you spoke to me about the stress deposits in your body and how that works. Can you share that with our listeners as, you know, the science behind the benefit attached to meditation?
Yes, good. Look, what happens is that stress is not necessarily an event, which it can be, like the death of a parent or a loved one or a marriage breakup or... you know, the loss of financial, you know, dependence in business. They're acute forms of stress, but stress is predominantly pressure and challenge and change, which is every day. So what happens is if I drew a line and I said, this is what we call the resilience line, and above the line I'm positive and I'm solution-minded, right? below the line, I'm negative and problem focused. So what happens is every day, a businessman or all of us in life, are aspiring to be more above the line and less below the line. But we may go below the line more often than we'd like to. Mm-hmm. But generally what happens is when we go below the line, we play the blame game. So when I get negative and I'm very problem focused, I might go, well, Jason, you're causing me to go below the line. Seriously, So the constants in life are that there's always challenge, there's always change, and there's always pressure. That never go away.
That's interesting because it sounds like opposing. The constant in life is there's always change.
It's constant.
Yeah.
And challenge is a constant. A juggle of life is a constant. But when you play the blame game and you blame pressure, challenge and change for the cause, you move accountability away from looking at changing yourself, which is where you came in. The universe is going, look, you need to do something different. The reason meditation is so incredible is that it builds the resilience line, and it brings this self-awareness of, when I am below the line, I don't play the blame game because I accept that the reason I'm below the line is the state I'm in. If I was in a different neurological and physiological state, I wouldn't go below the line. So pressure, challenge and change is never the cause of being below the line. It's really pointed towards my routine. So what routine do I have that increases the narrowness of the resilience line, and what routine do I have that builds the resilience line? Meditation does that in such an effective way, and you can talk to the most successful people in different industries in the world that meditate, and they'll say it's been a lifesaver. So go back to your question, why? Because when you meditate, you actually, because what stress is that it's a chemical build-up predominantly in the nervous system. So if you've got 80,000 thoughts a day and 45,000 of them are worrying and anxious, you overboot the nervous system with those chemicals that hype the nervous system up and make you more react. So let me give you an example. Okay, what are some of the symptoms of being stressed? Well, I don't sleep well. So that's the first big problem. The second is I'm just impatient. You're talking to me and I'm thinking, geez, we should hurry up. I've got something to say. And the third one is that, I'm just no longer as sweet and loving as I used to be. I'm kind of just...
And you're saying all this theoretical, you're not necessarily saying that about the presenter.
No.
We're all clear here.
No, but
although it feels very much it's about me,
It's a general thing, and so the point is that when you meditate, with even a week, you notice that you've got more patience. Now, you're not trying to be more patient, it's just that if there's less cortisol and less adrenaline, you're sleeping better. So the first thing that happens is you sleep better, you just seem to have more time, and your response to stimulus, whatever that might be, pressure, challenge and change, is completely different. And so it's amazing, but it's physiological.
I know myself, my resilience line, see how I'm learning and listening, as opposed to trying to think of my next question. No, but my resilient line is a lot thicker, and I sleep a lot better. I know that for sure. I know that I've got more time. And I think the benefit is cascading. It rolls on. It's like that rolling, bit of snow that rolls down the hill, and it's a big dirty big snowball. I spoke to a person that I consider a thought leader. And he said to me about a series of podcasts that he listens to from the States, and the guy that does the podcast now, I can't remember if it was Timothy Ferriss or Joe Rogan or somebody, and he's had these amazing business leaders and political leaders and great thinkers and all these people that make a difference in the world. And they all had their own little nuances. The top 5 things that they did that, they thought were a leading indicator to them being successful. And he narrowed it down to the top 10, and each one of them had meditation in their top 5, which I find intriguing. And listening to you just then, I was thinking, I know the work that you've done with elite sporting clubs. You work for Carlton Footy Club. I'm not going to say that they're elite. No. I know Carlton Footy Club's a great club, and you've been there a couple of times. And I think about, a guy that I know, Mark Allen, who's a pro golfer, and he has the ability to get himself into a real great mindfulness state. And he was the world's #1 chipper and a really good putter. And he was engaged by the Collingwood Footy Club for goal kicking practice. Now, he'd never played football at the highest level himself, but had the ability to transcend and get his mind into a calming place, so that then when you're taking a shot on goal, you're in a better physiological position, if you like, without getting the jitters, so to speak.
Yeah, interesting.
Tell me some of the work that you've done with the sporting clubs. You went to touch on it before, and there's no doubt that I would have interrupted you. Some of the work you did when you were down at Carlton Footy Club, and the bloke said here, look, let's hope that they don't fall asleep. What sort of stuff knowledge did you impart on them?
Well, that was in the very early days, gee whiz, before meditation. I was very, Carlton was really ahead of, they wanted to try something.
Yeah.
But, back then it was actually Dick Pratt that asked me to come in.
How do you know Dick
Long
Pratt?
story. Oh, look, we were doing work with a company back in those days called Macintoshes. But I met Dick and, he was interested personally, and then, said, oh, look, why don't you have a chat? And that was so kind of out there, really.
I suppose in 1989, that's 30 odd years ago. It's a long time ago. Very well.
Yeah. John Elliott used to come up to me before the game and go, mate, I don't know what you do here, but have you got the heads right and they're worth a bet? True story. And, but in those days, you had, really incredible icons of footy, that weren't really that used to being listening that well to anyone, really.
Well, I think back to in 1989, 1990, there was the likes of Greg Williams and Rhys Jones and, Wal Perovic and these sort of guys. They were all meditating.
Wayne Johnston. Yeah. So, not a lot of success in some parts there, but anyway, got to know them. But people like Ian Herman and, Oh,
he's actually quite successful in business now, I think, Ian.
Well, he's CEO at Grant Thornton.
Yeah, that's right.
He's still meditating. People like Justin Madden, who came from Essendon to Carlton. We're off, but really interesting. Justin was really, he'd say, just done, He really was struggling because, footy clubs think that everyone has the same physiological type to get out there and train the same way.
It's like 6'10".
Justin used to just hang out hoping, that no one had asked him to go out on the track, because he'd go to Jezza, if you want me to play on Saturday, mate, just leave me alone, because seriously, I need a week to recover. But, he learnt to meditate, and that was an amazing, I reckon he got another few years out of that. And Justin's still meditating today.
Yeah.
I hope you're Justin. Mate. And still catch up with those guys.
Yeah, right.
But I did go back. Sticks was chairman. I was at Collingwood in 2010 when we did win the grand final.
Yeah.
I got to throw that in.
Yeah.
Someone asked me this question yesterday, and I said, well, I'll be the only person that say that meditation made a difference.
Yeah.
But, it did. And but I came to Carlton with Mick again.
Yeah.
That was a different story. That wasn't so successful.
Yeah.
But anyway, been to many clubs over the years, Western Bulldogs, St Kilda, with Stan Alves.
Oh, yeah, he's a great man, Stan Alves.
Very, great.
He tells a wonderful story, well, not a wonderful, very interesting and deep story about the loss of a child and all that sort of stuff. And well, Stan Alves nearly won a premiership in 1997. Should have won it. They just... One would have argued that they should have just moved that bloke off Jarman who kicked 6 goals in 2 minutes. But it's not about footy, although I love my footy. What I'm interested in is getting back to the art/science of meditation. And I, being at your practice there, and I remember in the early doors when you said, Jason, to do it at its best, if you can, you meditate 3 times a day. And I'm thinking to myself, Steve, how the hell am I going to find the time to meditate 3 times a day? And
Well,
So-
that was only for you.
Yeah, because I'm a nut job.
Most people 2 days,
Yeah.
2 times a day.
I can't tell you the person that I am when I meditate 3 times a day.
Yeah.
I used to think, how am I going to get this into my routine? But I'm living proof that when you get into the cycle, what happens is you sleep more, you have a better pattern of sleep, so therefore you need less sleep. You'd say, wake up in the morning, have a glass of water, first thing I want you to do is meditate. And I'm thinking, but I haven't got that much time. If I'm going to get up in the morning, I want to do something that's really beneficial. I want to go for a run or lift weights and exercise. And when I'm at my peak performance with my mind, body, health, I'm meditating for 20 minutes in the morning. I got that app that you told me that the gong goes off.
Yep.
I meditate for 20 minutes and the gong goes off, and I come out of my meditative state and have a cup of coffee and have a workout, have a shower, get to work. I am crystal clear. And life's challenges that are thrown at me, it's almost like being in the Matrix, where you can. And I liken it akin to playing sport. We all know of those sports people, whether it's basketball, football, netball, those team sports that people play, those people that seem to have more time on the field. You know, I'm an Essendon supporter, and a lot of our listeners won't even know who this guy is, but his name's Gary Folds. He wore number 10 for Essendon, and number 10's a famous number because it was worn by Jonathan Coleman, who's arguably the greatest full forward that ever played the game. And Gary Folds played 300 games for Essendon and seemed to have more time than anyone else. And every time I get into that state, I feel like you can throw a heap of problems at me, and I seem to be able to manage it. And can you share a bit? I mean, obviously you don't know what's going on in my mind, but that mindfulness state, why do all the worries don't seem to cascade and cause us anxiety or stress because we're in a good state? Why is that?
Well, it's a good question. There's 2 ways to answer it, and I want to bring science in on that level. But the first thing is that very few people are in the present. So, the problem, we talk about it from be in the present, but the reality is that most people are worried about what they haven't done or what they've got to do. So wherever they are, if you said to someone, is there such a thing as the past? They'd say, of course there is. But in reality, we know there's not. If you said to someone, is there...
Hang on a minute. Just take me through that again.
Well, when I say to you, is there such a thing as the past?
And I'll say, absolutely.
Yeah.
Things happened yesterday.
Is such a thing as the future?
Well, I assume so.
That's right. Why have I got this guy on? But the reality is that you never are in the past or the future. You're only ever in the present. So the only place you live in those places is in your mind.
That's right.
So most people are mentally not where they physically are at that time. So the problem with that is that they bring a lot of anxiety into the present. So they kill where they are by worrying about something that hasn't happened or worrying about something they can't change. Right? So when you meditate, you can give a neurological explanation for that. That basically when there is a lot of stress in the system, you're never present. And so you're on. You wake up in the morning, most people wake up and they have the same routine every day. They worry about the same stuff, they get upset with the same people, and they're just on autopilot. It's like repeating yesterday over and over again. And they never really change anything, even though they'd like to. But when you're meditating, you take yourself into that place where the brain, and there's a lot of research on it, they use MRI and EEG, changes the whole frontal cortex of the brain, which is your CEO of the brain. So the CEO of the brain is strategy, the ability to think clearly, the ability to be present. But when you're stressed, the frontal cortex of the brain goes offline. And so you're actually really worrying about stuff that's not where you need to be at that time. So when you come out of meditation, it's like you're present. You're kind of moving through the day.
You're bringing the CEO back into the chair.
You're bringing the frontal cortex into the mainstream. So everyone runs around, does gym, do all of that. But unless you manage the frontal cortex,
it's all for nothing.
You're managing the body but not the mind. And it's not the body the body controls the mind when you become stressed. But if you're not stressed, the mind controls the body.
Yeah, wow.
That's a big factor. So the ability to just move through your day where I've got the next meeting, but I'm not going to be anxious about the next meeting 1 hour before the meeting. I'm enjoying where I am, and when I get to that meeting, I'll get to that meeting.
Yeah.
Or if I'm doing strategy and I've been meditating regularly, guess what? I'm really on song.
It takes me back to one of the appointments we had when Alex booked the appointment. He did 2 different times, one in my diary and one in yours.
Right.
And we spoke on the phone. And you just were not worried one iota. And I know that if it was me and I missed a client meeting or whatever, I'd be having a heart attack, sweating bullets and, panicking. And, you were just all, oh, well, I'm here at the cafe, I'm doing my thing, I'll see you soon, take your time. Well, how's this bloke? He's a gift. And I mean, I say that in a positive way.
Yeah, I don't mean that to be that, because when you are meditating, you really are on song. I mean, that it shouldn't be, like that's, we won't go into that, but, in terms of not caring or being... No,
I'm not saying that at all. Griffith, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that there was nothing that you could have done to change that situation.
No, that's right. I'm not going to...
And I really like the notion of being present, but I think there's a distinct difference. It's obviously it's important to plan ahead and think about the future. Set goals.
Big time.
Yeah, you're a big proponent of that. I know you are.
Absolutely.
But also, the present is a gift, and that's why it's called. I think you've coined that phrase. That's why it's a present, Jason.
That's
you'd say
right.
to me.
You're here now.
Yeah, and we've all interacted. I remember early doors, 10, 15 years ago, we did some work on a thing called the Johari or Yohari window. Depends on what side of the Moonee Ponds Creek you grew up on, Steve-O. But I think it's spelled Johari, Johari window. And one of the things it talks about is your blind spot and having greater awareness about your blind spot and having more awareness about what it's like to be around Steve Griffith or what it's like to be around Jason Cunningham. And we've all engaged with those people. You're in a meeting or you're having a conversation where they're not actually present in that conversation. And I think there's nothing more, is the word, disingenuous and less authentic. I spoke to a real estate agent the other day, and I'll be very conscious of, because we've got a lot of real estate agents that are clients, and a lot of them are amazing, but some of them, they just go through the motion and go through the process. And currently selling one of our investment properties, and I could hear him tapping away at his emails as he's talking to me in such a just rhetoric type language, and I'm like, mate, why the fuck are we even talking when you're not even paying attention to what I'm saying? And there was a learning or a lesson in that for me to always be present in the person's company that I'm in. And I think it's never more true, those of us that are parents, is to be, when your kids are ready for you, they're ready to have a conversation. And you've got to be present in that conversation. It's so important. And that's why I was really keen to get you on, Steve-O. And I know I asked you a few times and you were very relaxed about it, so I'm just taking a piss. But finally get you on because I wanted people to hear and experience what I experienced. Yeah. Because a lot of us are highly strung, and we've been through a year where it's been challenging. People in this room have been challenged. A heap of mates of mine, whether they've been in hospitality, whether they've been in TV, film, and entertainment, whatever industry they've been, everybody, it has suffered. No one has escaped it.
No one. Not even us.
No, that's your business as well. Yeah. Tell me about the impact on your business.
Oh, huge, because, like in March last year, because we run predominantly, we teach meditation, but we run leadership programs, and we put through 1,000, 1,500 people a year. March finished, only started again this year.
So you went from 1,500
We own health retreats.
Yeah, in Bali?
Closed. Yeah. Opening a new one here in Romsey next year.
Oh, wow.
So that's exciting.
Yeah.
But look, what you can control, like none of the businesses that have failed are because anyone did anything wrong. It's just one of those, COVID has been an invisible, kind of force that's really taken its toll. And I don't think we're not really seeing that. People are talking about the real estate market being crazy and the stock market being crazy, but the little person, not the little person, the significant support of this country is made up of small business.
Absolutely.
And they've been smashed.
Small business actually employs 50%
Yeah.
of the country and makes up about 55% of the GDP.
And you go into the city and you think, my goodness me, the 4 lease signs, it's just incredible.
Everywhere. And it's not just the business owner, it's the landlord who owns that property.
Yeah.
You know, he might own it in his super fund or whatever. They're getting belled as well. So what do you say? So I'll give you a perfect example. A couple of weeks ago, I got a client who produces the best coffee in the country, right?
No names?
No, I won't say his name, but he makes the best. He wholesales, roasts his own coffee, wholesales it to his little cafes and other cafes around the place. And I went to see him a couple of Mondays ago. And let's call him Joe Blow. And I said, hey, Joe Blow, how are things? And I knew that they weren't ideal because he's in the city. And first bit of evidence was that I parked out the front, right? You never get a park in the city. Number 2, I said to him, all right, so how's business going? He said, Jace, normally we turn over $3,500 a day from selling coffee and a few Danishes and croissants and stuff like that. And today's been our best day in 9 months and we did $600. I go, how you going? He goes, mate, I'm struggling. How do you, putting you on the spot, which is one of my gifts, how do you communicate with him and get him in the right mind space?
Well, I could, pressure, challenge and change is really accentuated, by COVID in that context. But unless you retain your inner sense of wellness in managing self in the face of all of that, life becomes really tough. Now, you can't change the financial reality of that, but unless you remain above the line, how do you sort of then see a vision for the future? How do you problem solve? How do you, if you're completely negative and you're in a very bad state, then that's not a good place to be to plan your next step or your future. So you've got to come back to retaining positive routines under pressure. But what happens is that people revert to alcohol, drugs, other things to mask the pain.
Fast cars, fast women.
Yeah. Well, that might have been the 80s.
Yeah.
But they mask the pain.
Yeah.
To try and move through that. But they then, unfortunately, increase the inability to manage the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me this. Do you mind sharing with us what your practice is? And do you ever find a period you go, gee, I haven't meditated for a while, I better jump back on the wagon? Can you share with it? Or is it just, as you mentioned, habitual for you?
Well, I think if you remember, we talked a little bit about all the research on rewiring of the brain and that, we've all got habits and routines that have been hardwired, either consciously or unconsciously. We may have unconsciously hardwired old habits that aren't really that positive for us. So the research shows that it takes about 120 days to rewire the brain to a new routine. So with meditation, we say you need 3 months of regularly doing it. And people do it because they're feeling good. It's not like they're having to do it. They enjoy it, like you've said. So that's the first thing. For me, because I sort of really, when I learned, it was like a game changer. I knew that was something that was going to help me. And
were you highly strung prior to that and quite stressed?
Well, I was involved in sports. I was involved in snow skiing.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, mate. Yeah.
But I'd had a serious accident. And it was in recovery, and so I was interested in it from a physiological point of view. But it changed everything, and so I just, I've hardwired myself to a routine, and I've been meditating 35 years every day, twice a day.
It's like drinking
water.
Haven't missed.
It's like cleaning your teeth. Whatever. So it's a habituated routine. But the interesting thing about it is that the benefit of it increases. It doesn't plateau.
The more you do it.
Yeah, the longer you do it. It's funny, I went to a school reunion and, If you'd have been, it was a boarding school, and if you'd have been around, they'd say, mate, he'll be dead by 25, like, or he'll never get, like it was, my lifestyle wasn't that, I enjoyed life to its fullest.
I can see that in your eyes.
But, the point being that, I walked into a 30-year school reunion.
And they go, shit, he's alive.
Well, I said, gee, I've made one good decision in my life.
Yeah.
I mean, I made a couple, but one of them was learning to meditate because I promise you there was a few around that room that weren't looking that great.
Yeah.
So the point is that things take its toll over stress, alcohol. People start off drinking, 1 or 2 nights a week. It becomes 5 nights. And that sort of affects the physiology over the long term.
That's right. Yeah.
So, it's like some good habits make a long-term difference, and meditation's one of them.
That's quite encouraging that the more I do it, the more benefit I'm going to get from it. You know what I also enjoy about your company is the fact that, as in your presence,
Thank you.
Is how you run your business. And I, as I've said to you 100 times over, every time I walk through the doors there in Heidelberg, I just feel at peace straight away. I love the fact that your son Alex works there. I think that's as a father myself, that it must be a real proud moment when when your son became a meditation teacher. Everyone's so welcoming, and you are, like, I look up to you, and I have a lot of respect for you, and you're a mentor and a teacher of mine, but you're also like me. You're a business owner. You got to pay the rent, you got to earn a buck. You got belted during COVID, and I think one of the things that when business owners get together and we have conversations like this, 2 other business owners in this room as we're recording, and it's good to have conversations with them because they got hurt just like I did and just like you did, and we all have different layers of how we dealt with it. It's that's one of the things that brings us business owners together is that we go, you've got clients, you've got debtors, you've got employees and team members and stakeholders, and you've got to pay your rent, and it just didn't miss anyone.
Didn't miss anyone.
I want to tap into one of the things that you said, Steve, though, if I can. You spoke about habitual habits, and one of the things about what I know is, I guess, congruent or shared with a lot of successful people is they've got various different habits that they do every single day. And it sounds to me that this habit forming around mindfulness and getting your mind right is something that's really important. I know that I've benefited from it, and it's just, you can't go at it spasmodically. If you're going to have a crack, you might as well do it.
Well, I think once you learn to meditate, you very quickly within 4 or 5 days notice the benefits.
Yeah.
It's not like you have to practice it for years or months. And so that's encouraging. So, even the first day you come out of that. So that's the interesting thing. I can talk to a group of 50 people and they can all, like a lot of our business is through organisations. So it's not so much individuals. So, some organisations might put through, 200 or 300 people through our program. But you walk into a room because you as CEO have said, look, we're doing this program. They walk into a room and go, what's this about? But the moment they learn, so they're all sceptical. There might be 10 that want to do it, 20 couldn't care less, and the other 30 think, oh, well, this is a waste of time. But those 50 by the end of the 4th day will be thinking, wow, this is pretty good. So it doesn't require a positive attitude or, the desire. The experience changes their attitude towards it because they wake up the next day and think, gee, I've got more energy or I slept better.
Well, that's the biggest benefit I had from day one was that I went to sleep that night in about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Right? And now I could lay awake for 2-3 hours thinking many thoughts, mainly about myself. But just, anxious thoughts or thinking about tomorrow and what I needed to do.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that you told me was to meditate prior to going to sleep. So I'd sit up in my bed and have my pillows set up there and I'd roll out my mantra, and next minute I'm waking up, I'm sitting up, and that was the first biggest benefit that I had. And I just know that when you get the right amount of sleep, you're a different person the next day. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the benefits just cascade and roll on. What did you mentioned you're in sport prior to becoming a meditation teacher. What did you do for a quid?
Well, no, I really, out of school, my father owned a farm and he was a real estate agent.
Yeah, right.
I came from the country up around Albury. So, he always wanted me to go back on the farm or join the real estate business, but neither of those things happened. I wanted to ski. He thought that was a waste of time.
Yeah.
Probably was.
Yeah.
No, I think, I really didn't, for 2 or 3 years of skiing, and then I had the accident, and then I went back to skiing, but then I decided to become a meditation teacher.
Do you mind sharing with us, we're running a little bit short on time,
Yep.
but do you mind sharing with us the story when you met, and I really struggled to pronounce it, the Maharishi?
Maharishi.
Yeah. Well, that was relatively close.
Yeah, it was. Well
Pretty
done.
close. It's not as if I said Peter. Do you mind sharing the story with when you met him and the job he gave you, the task he gave you?
Oh, gee, that's a big story.
Oh, it is a long story.
Look, I one of the most, I suppose, people might, if they ask me the question, what would be the sort of significant thing you've done in your life, which was, I suppose, really being a vehicle for a vision of his, which was to create a university for orphans in Cambodia. And so that was at a conference that he was speaking at, and he wanted someone volunteer to go and do some projects, and I didn't volunteer, but he more or less asked me to do it.
He volunteered you.
Yeah, he volunteered me. At that point, even though I'd been teaching meditation for 8 or 9 years, I hadn't really had much to do with Maharishi because, he was, really a global figure.
Yeah.
And thousands of people would try and get to see him each day. But anyway, yes, I flew to Cambodia in 1990 on a project which really, when I landed in Cambodia, the country was, there was nothing there.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't even know where it was.
Yeah, right. And it wasn't as if it was a safe place either.
It wasn't safe.
It's not like you're flying to Sydney.
Pol Pot was still at war.
Wasn't a nice bloke.
No, it was not a nice bloke. Yeah. And but you couldn't go. I got to Bangkok and they'd say, well, I want to go to Cambodia. They'd look at you and go, really?
Yeah.
No, you can catch a train, but that gets used at least attacked once a week. Oh, well, that's not a good idea. Yeah. There's a Fokker, friendship flight that takes parcels and a few passengers. That's what it was like. Yeah. I mean, when I landed in Phnom Penh, it was a ghost town. Yeah, right. There was a curfew at 6 o'clock. All the army went down the streets.
And there would have been not a heap of blokes that looked like you.
No, there was. You walked into the Mekong Hotel and you could have fired a cannon, you wouldn't have hit anybody. But it was very interesting. I mean, after a couple of days, I thought, no. So I did ring him. And to ring him, you went down to a corner place and, you got someone in an old exchange and, to put the call through, and you had to go to a telephone box and pick up when it rang. And I said, oh, can I speak with, Maharishi? Yes. And I said, oh, look, Maharishi, I'm not sure if you've got the right person. Really,
I'm pretty good on the ski fields.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm the man, And he said, does the sun come up in the morning? And I said, yes. And he said, do you worry about, planets bumping into each other or, and it was sort of a philosophical comment. He said, well, there's an intelligence that operates everything, in the universe. And he said, you don't think that universal intelligence can't manage you finding some place to, create in some small paddy field, some buildings that could educate the future of the children of Cambodia to help them create a new future. And he said, well, when you got the job done, give us a call back. But it was funny.
And the long story short is that you did.
Well, I stayed. Yeah, I mean, but look, the end of the story was that we started a university and it got set up and it's graduated thousands and thousands of students. But not that was my doing. I mean, so many people became a part of that. But the point was, stay positive and above the line. and you will attract the means by which that will happen. And a couple of days later, I met the president of Cambodia, called Chea Sim, and he took me on. He said, "Meet me tomorrow," at the airport. And I thought, "Oh God, there I go! I'm getting kicked out."
Yeah.
And I went there, and he had a helicopter, and he, a whole army and 2 other helicopters, and we hurtled over the Cambodia down to the Vietnam border to a place called Kam Chai Mea, which is where he grew up as a kid.
Yeah.
And he said,
build a university in my suburb.
And he'd already organised a big event there. They'd sort of sent ahead, and we arrived, and he said, "This man says he's going to build a university in Kam Chai Mea." This was in Khmer, and the translator, we don't know if he's really a liar or he's going to do it, But anyway, we've got him here, and we're going to give him the land. And a mate of mine was with me. He said, that story about, building the fields, they'll come. He said, "Mate, I'm out of here."
As he looked across to the firing squad.
This is a bloody rice paddy in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
How are we going to build why can't they give us a building
downtown
in Phnom Penh that's all empty?
That's right.
But
that makes a bit more sense to me.
Yeah, well, that's right. Anyway, we did build it there, and he and I became very good friends. And not only him, but Sa Keng, who's now the Minister for Defence, and it was an amazing journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, but they all learned to meditate.
Yeah.
But when they arrived, guess what they were carrying?
Machine guns? Oh, no.
M16s.
Oh, they were?
Every second or third kid had a gun stuck under the bed. That was their life. Their parents had been killed.
How old do these kids walk around with M16s?
Well, they'd have them somewhere because they lived in villages all over.
Yeah.
And they were frightened of Pol Pot. They were in an area that Pol Pot still, they were scared to go there. Anyway, we taught meditation there, and it was quite a journey. Steve,
we're going to end
up.
it there, mainly because the producer is in such a great state that he's fallen asleep. No, I'm not joking. That was pretty poor work for me, to be honest. And if I'm actually to have a good hard look at myself, I'm better than that. So, Steve, in closing, for those people that are listening that would want to take up the art of meditation, and I'm not saying this is an ad for your business or anything like that, it's mainly really an ad for ours. So how do they find you, and what do you say to them if they say that they don't have time to meditate?
Oh, look, I think, first of all, you have to learn, to meditate, and then judge whether you want to allocate the time to it. Once you've learned, you see the benefit that we say, don't manage time, manage energy. If you don't have energy, you'll never have enough time. So if you've got lots of energy, you'll always have enough time. So yes, look, they can contact us through Griffith Consulting, which is, basically just Google Griffith Consulting or Google Veda Wellness. They're the 2 businesses. Or if they want to join us one day in Bali, they can join us at Sugawati Retreats.
I'm looking forward to Bali opening up, or they can just send me an email and I'll forward on.
Yeah, thank you.
Details.
Yeah, that's good. But now, next...
Romsey, huh?
Romsey, that's at Maston Ranges.
Yeah, well, we were going to have our rejuvenation day, but that got
cancelled due to Dan.
He's a mate of yours, isn't he?
He's a good guy.
No, well, let's not talk about that. Steve Griffith, thank you. You've been
Jason,
outstanding.
Thank you very much, mate. That was a great pleasure. Really great. Thank you.